Okay, so here we are again. Welcome to the Sovereign Mamas podcast, and welcome to you, my dear Rochelle. It's really
Thank
good
you.
to
I'm so
see
excited to
you.
be here.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Thank you for carving out the time and saying yes to this. Um, I know we've had some conversations before, and we've only met and connected a little while ago through, let me get this straight, through another Facebook group. And then I reached out and I saw, like, yeah, now I remember. I saw your funnel and how you lead people into your email newsletter. And then also the emails that you're sending. And that's when I felt the pull to connect with you a bit more deeply. And we shared what we're currently working on. And so I said, I have to have you on the podcast. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, it was a fun email invitation that I got from you to connect further. So, that's
Cool. So, if we talk, obviously, this show is all about motherhood, the craziness, the combination of being a mom and an entrepreneur. And so, perhaps to get us started, would you like to describe who you are when we could take the labels off and just from the perspective of this is me currently.
okay. I love that because when you first asked, I was like, my mind went back a little bit. And then you're like, currently, I'm like, oh, okay, let's bring it present. So it's just funny the way that we can define and see ourselves in different times, right? Um, So I am a very like free-spirited person, I would say. I think that, yeah, one defining factor about me is just I like to seek adventure and I like to go where the wind takes me. And so I always want to tie everything back into entrepreneurship and motherhood, but it's like that has been the seeds of everything that I've done in my life. And so, it's like because I have this desire to go towards freedom. And I think that's really the underlying thing of all of it is that I have this desire to feel free beyond anything else. And so it's kind of what made me, every choice from having my babies at home to homeschooling them was a choice that I think was ultimately rooted in that, even though at the time I didn't really know. Every decision that I've made, even like where I decided to go to college, was very rooted in this idea of like, they did things very differently and it was a very student based approach and all of these things. And so now looking back, I have this awareness that I was like chasing freedom. But uh but I would say that that's like a big defining factor of who I am today and the choices that I make on the daily, and also realizing that freedom looks different for everybody. Because to me, this idea of being able to be with my kids all day and go, take them on adventures whenever I want and do all this stuff feels like freedom. And I have mama friends that are like, that does not feel like freedom to have my kids with me all day long. So, I think that that's also such an important thing is just like following what our definition of those things looks like. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's me in a nutshell.
Beautiful, that's beautiful. And it's so funny when you say that. And it is a representation of life in general, right? What does success mean? What does freedom
Mm,
mean? How do you mother, right? And everyone has their own different versions. And yet, I guess the most challenging part for everyone, is to actually let that happen. But then the breakthrough is once you accept this is my version of motherhood, entrepreneurship, freedom, success, whatever, that is then when it becomes your story. Now
yeah.
you're imitating. Now you're not acting from, oh, comparison. This is how. And that is, I feel like this is always giving me the chills when I think about life in general and see other people. I can clearly see that they are walking their path. Um, and I am like, I don't know, I think we talked about human design before, haven't we? Yes, yes, we did. Um,
Yeah.
and this is one of my things when I look at my human design and really fully sink into it and think, oh yeah, of course I'm doing it my way. It does so make sense, but it doesn't make sense to the people around me sometimes, right? And
Yeah.
it's this becoming of your truest version, which can be scary, which is sometimes challenging. And it's an everyday process. It's an everyday task to step in back into it. And no, no, this is right. No, no, this feels good. And we talk a lot about feeling on this podcast. So maybe is there any defining moment where you say, oh, this, like my feeling led me here?
Yes. My entire life, I feel like I'm chasing, like I said, that feeling, right? But I think I have a fun story about like how we are today. We're actually, well, there's two things. One, I wanted to touch on this idea that you were talking about before I go into that. Just that we are, I feel like this idea of finding our truth is also a little bit of a moving target because we're evolving humans. And I just feel like every mama needs to hear this because I think sometimes there's this idea that we'll have reached a certain point where we know that we are there. And, maybe for some people that's true. I'm not saying it's not, but I think in my own experience, there's not a finish line. There's a process, and we're constantly evolving deeper into ourselves. And sometimes further away from that and then back again. And it's this constant growth process. And I think that sometimes when we tell ourselves that there's a point when we'll just be like, oh, I've arrived, it can feel like we're not reaching it. And it can cause this like almost like furthering away from that goal because I'm also, I don't know if you do Enneagram stuff. I don't know if we talked about that, but I'm Enneagram 1 and a firstborn. So I'm also very much like I like to do things quote unquote the right way. And I like to be seen as good and be, you know, in that space. And so when I feel like I haven't reached a certain thing, I can tend to get down on myself. And so I just wanted to touch on this idea that I think that it's a constant process. And the closest that we can get to that, in my opinion, is continuing to do the work, to show up for ourselves, to ask the questions. It's not to say like plant your flag and be like, I did it, I arrived, I'll never grow or change again. It's like to say, like, I am on this journey for myself where I'm just going to tap into awareness and I'm going to continue to do my best to stay within alignment and also understand that that might change and also understand that my definition of success might change and also realize that my idea of what I want to do with my kids or how I want to approach different things might change and letting that be okay. That has been probably one of the biggest lessons for me on this journey of like just growing as a human and not only as an entrepreneur but just as a human. So I wanted to say that for all of the people that think like me, that sometimes can use it as a weapon against ourselves to feel like, why am I not there? Whatever that means, yet.
Yeah.
Um, so sorry for that tangent, but I was like, I just want to say this. Um, and then the other question, the original question, do you remember what it was? I got distracted by myself.
I guess I wanted to see if there's a moment you remember.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, the feeling, following a feeling. So there's one really pivotal moment that has changed my family's life in every possible way. And it was 3 years ago now. And my husband, actually, it was more, it was 3.5 years. And my husband had lost his job, and he has always been the primary provider for our household. I am a homeschooling mom, and I do have that as my job first. But I'm also an incredibly driven entrepreneur that has started many different businesses in different, everything from product-based businesses to service-based. And I've written a children's book. Like I've done a lot of different things, but I've always defined myself as a dreamer. And so we joke that like I have the dreams and take the risks, and then he like foots the bill, because it's like it's just this dynamic. And I've always known in my heart, it's something that I'm always a little uncomfortable saying, but since I was young, I always knew I was going to achieve something and create something. And I didn't know what that meant. And I think as a woman talking about that and saying that can sound or feel like braggy or conceited or something like that. At least that's a story I've told myself. But since I was little, I was like, I'm going to create something and have my definition of wealth through that. And so, um, anyhow, this has always been a story that I've told myself, but in conflict with this idea that I haven't achieved it yet. And so, I hadn't, it's always been this ongoing story. And so he lost his job, and I had always just brought in extra money. And when he lost well, I guess a little bit before that, we had gone to Maui, Hawaii for our 10-year anniversary. And when we were there, I was said, okay, whenever we can, we need to bring the kids back here and do like a 6-month like homeschool study in Hawaii. Like I want them to experience this. And so he lost his job, and immediately through that, energetic exchange of him not being able to provide, I accidentally, really, I didn't do anything different, but I just made a choice that I was going to step into bringing in more wealth for our family. And within a week of making that decision, I was able to support our family's needs at that time for the following several months. And it's not to say that I hadn't done all this work. I had done so much work to get to that point, but there's so much of it that is a belief system of what we're going to allow ourselves to do. And I took myself out of the belief system because I have this tendency I have a lot of, historically, I've had a lot of self-worth issues and beliefs about what my capacity to deliver, in my own dreams is, and all sorts of things, all sorts of stories, right? Um, and so it was just funny that when I shifted that belief, I took myself out of it and I said, this isn't really for you in this moment. This is for your family right now. Because it never had that level of pressure, technically. I was always allowed to play, right? And so when I did it, I was able to do that. And I was driving down the freeway and I saw by myself, which never ever happens. I'm never without my children. It's never silent in the car. And I was driving in silence and I had this feeling drop in of you should go to Hawaii. And I was like, huh, yeah, I forgot we wanted to do that because the last couple of months we were in survival of like, how are we going to do this and whatnot. And then I drove a little longer and I saw the Hawaii bread factory. And I was like, okay, I hear you, universe. So I like turned Siri on and I texted my husband and I was like, why aren't we in Hawaii right now? And he texted me back, said, I don't know. And 5 days later, we had a flight booked and we had everything ready to go at an Airbnb for 5 weeks. And we were going to go on my, unpredictable new income with my husband still in interviews and no plan whatsoever. But I told him, I said, I feel like this is what we need to be doing. And I don't think we'll ever regret the time that we spent with our family in Hawaii for 5 weeks. I just don't think we'll ever regret that. And he agreed. It's been 3.5 years. We never left. We're still here. We ended up staying. He ended up getting a dream job here. Ironically, he's back in a position between jobs. But it's just funny because the universe again has been like, hey, you did this before. And then as soon as he got his job, I went back into my position of, okay, well, he has this, and I'm going to, you know, keep the story of like, will I be able to hit my goals and like all of these things? And the universe is like, all right, well, you didn't do it. You didn't believe yourself the first time. So now we're in this period of him between jobs and me stepping up again into another level and proving to myself again. He's always been my biggest supporter. He's always like, I don't have any doubt, but I'm like, but I've had the doubt. So, um, so being able to just rewrite those things and really be able to, yeah, prove to myself in a bigger way and clear through some of those beliefs. So yes, following a feeling, like probably coming to Hawaii was the biggest following a feeling because I felt like a crazy person that was so called to go, even though both of our families are in the same place and, they're both in Southern California and everything that we know is there. And I was like, is it crazy to just chase this feeling that I want to go, and luckily no one on either side of our family thought it was crazy. They were like, no, please go. So, it's changed our lives and every day has been beyond what we could imagine, even these times that feel like they could be sticky or tricky. And I think it's because we like those giant trust falls. There's been times in our lives in the last several years where we've done these giant trust falls where like this makes no sense, but let's just see if the universe catches us. and and it has. So yeah.
That's so cool. And I love that so much because it is just simply showing or giving a perfect example of how when you trust your intuition, this feeling, you get rewarded. And it takes a minute to play around and also allow this to come up and listen to it. And then you're really very blessed to have people around that accept you for going for it. There's other people, including myself, when I had a similar story, not that it's in any way the same, but when I left Germany when I was 29, I should have had the family, the house, the career path continued according to the book and family and friends. And I quit my job, sold everything, and did say, it just feels like I need to travel for a bit. But you're not 18 or 20 or, you should be sitting now thinking about how many children you want or already have one. And so what it comes down to is really then not giving a fuck if someone else is having a different opinion and still go through it. But once you did, do you agree that once you've done it once, it becomes easier each time?
Yeah, I think, well, it's funny because I think that yes, it gets easier each time and also more unbelievable, if that makes sense. Like every time that we take the jump into something that makes no logical sense,
Mhm.
but and obviously they're like calculated risks in some aspect. Like we're not going to put our family at like, you know, a major risk of something, but when we have said like we're gonna follow this because it feels right, it turns out better each time, even when on paper it looks like it would not turn out well, if that makes any sense. So it's like there's that whole aspect. And also, I think it's interesting how, you were sharing your story and you said you didn't have the support. And the more people that I meet, it is so funny how you can have the same experience, even though you had totally different ways of living through that experience. So, for example, like because I have a very supportive family of entrepreneurship, I'm fourth generation entrepreneur on both sides of my family. So, not only are they supportive of it, but it's expected, right? That like you are going to create something for yourself. And I remember the first time I got a job, I was like the black sheep of the family. They're like, no, don't work for someone else. And it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like that would be so much better. That would be so much easier. But the pressure I put on myself, knowing that my family has been successfully doing entrepreneurship for 4 generations, and am I going to be able to live up to that? And it's like I've become my own worst enemy. And I feel like it's just interesting when I see people like, oh, I didn't have any support and I had all these thoughts and feelings coming from it. And like I had support and I had all these same thoughts and feelings coming from it. And I just think it's just humans are so interesting. The way that the stories that we create with who we are and how we absorb the world, even if the roots of it all are so different and contrasting. It's like our souls are like, you're gonna have to work through this, whether you came from this or you came from that, like you have to work through this, whether it's outside influence, bring kind of like being the barrier or your own inner voice being the barrier. And so it's just something I find fascinating. I'm like, how is that possible? When it's like two sides
Yeah.
of the coin, same outcome, same thought process, same things you have to work through, you know?
Yes, and that I think traveling opened my eyes and uh, like really put me into a place where I understood uh, people around the world, we're all people. It doesn't matter where we're coming from. And that is exactly what you just described. We're just talking about this one, like a one side of thing or one pivotal moment. But then when it comes to living life, and when I see people in other countries, they are going through the same shit. There are no differences, but we make them up and we think we're special. Everyone thinks was, I think that also is something that once you let go of this idea, yes, we all are unique, but then there's nothing so special about us. we have all these similar journeys, and the outcome is, or the seeking, I guess the goal, we all want our true, like find ourselves, our true happiness. But the way towards it, that's different and unique, of course. But we're all here to come back home,
Yes.
right? And it's just a matter of how you write your story.
Yep. I know. I often look at my husband, I'm like, how come we make everything so complicated as humans, you know? And it's like, it's also part of what makes life so rich. But
Hmm.
it's funny when you can take yourself and objectively like step back, right? And view yourself from the outside. And sometimes I can say, oh, I can see how I'm making this situation more complicated than it needs to be, or I'm creating a story that doesn't need to exist anymore. And thanking it for, it's like you can thank yourself. Thank you for trying to protect me through that. Thank you for understanding. I know what you were doing, but I got this. And being able to like thank, bless, and release it and move forward. But it is funny to me, like as I get older, it's like I can see now from the outside a little bit more where sometimes we're, like I said, just in our own way, we're making things complicated. And not to say life's not complicated. There are things that come up that are complicated and painful. But sometimes there's things that don't need to be. And it's being able to recognize in ourselves where we are causing that friction or staying with it. Like I know that there's sometimes when I say like addicted to certain patterns, right? And it's like, oh, within myself and stories that I've told myself, or the thrill of like having my business go in waves. And it's like, oh, I am addicted to that feeling. And it's like, okay, how do I now heal that and know that and let this be less complicated? Because um and the caveat, like the side step, is that there are real things. I'm not trying to downplay, like there are real things, traumas, difficulties, betrayals that people are going through. I'm more speaking of like the things that we within ourselves make more complicated that we don't need to.
Yeah, but even the serious things, they're just like part of, I believe they're like part of the manifestation that your soul needs in order to really look deeply. And the harder it gets, sometimes the more you need it to look closer. And yes, so also when you were talking, I was thinking the fact that you already identified your pattern is part of the healing process, because you can't see a pattern if you're still in it, right? But if you step out, you're already doing, you're already doing the first step that needs to happen in order to let go of this pattern and change it. And so,
Thank you for that.
no, I guess that's also very comforting to know. Like
Hmm.
sometimes we beat ourselves up, and I think especially mothers, like we tend to never see that we're good enough when it comes to our children. But then the fact that we're actually doing that loop of thinking, is this good enough, is already giving
Yeah.
giving so much value to our children, because we want the best. And it's the same for our inner child, right?
Yeah. That's such a good point. And I so appreciate that reflection because I agree with you. And sometimes it's, you know, harder to see the places where you're growing. And so I just appreciate that. And what you said reminded me. So I was raised Catholic, and I remember one time asking the priest in my like little catechism school, I said, I am curious about God. Like, does God exist? And I have these questions, and is it bad that I'm asking these questions? And I remember this could have gone a lot of different directions. I was probably like 8 years old or 7 years old. And he said, we only question things we care deeply about. And I was like, that that statement, whether no matter, aside from the religion or anything else, like really resonates in so many ways with so many things. And what you just said, it's like, if we care, the reason we're questioning these things, the reason why we're observing them, the reason why we're wondering if we're doing the right things is because we care deeply about them. So, yeah,
Yeah. Wow, that was really a good answer to an 8-year-old.
right?
Yes. I love that. When it comes to motherhood, what would you say, um, especially when it comes to motherhood and entrepreneurship? Like, what would you say is your biggest learning and also the biggest challenge?
Okay, so when you said that, immediately something came to mind. I think it's that this idea of the mirror, right? Like we know that the things in my children that like trigger me the most are the things that I haven't healed in myself or the things that I see as shortcomings in myself. And I think that it's a gift, but it's also a challenge because, you know, I've heard that the our inner critic is sometimes also the way that we parent our children. And that is, and I don't think that's true for everyone, but you know, I know when I'm saying something, I'll hear myself and I'll say, like, oh, that's my own wounding. That's the reason why that's frustrating so much to me is because either I was in trouble for it or I'm still carrying those things today and I don't accept those parts of myself. And that's what it is more for me. It's not necessarily like, oh, when I was a child, this, but what I notice in me is, oh, if I was doing that, I wouldn't accept myself. And I am passing that on, obviously love them unconditionally, but I will be correcting the behavior or something, but not necessarily from a healed place. Sometimes I can tell it's because it's triggering that in me. And I think that that's a challenge because it definitely, we're so open with each other. We have so much conversation, but there's times when I'm like, oh, I probably should have dealt with that a little bit in a kinder way or something because I know that I'll explain to them, like, I know that there's something in me that is causing that, or, that makes me feel a particular way about when you do this or when you talk to me this way or whatever it is. So it even feels so vulnerable to say this out loud, but
No,
that's
this
my
is great.
challenge.
And I'm sure everyone can relate to this. And when you said that, I was like, again and again, I think our children are our best teachers. Like you can't but look now that you're under the pressure of raising human beings, you want to do good, right? And thanks to them, you are looking into all these dark corners and cleanup and um, with their help, like I feel they are really helping. So yeah, it's a win-win. So good. And do you also, like when you say you come from this family of four generations of entrepreneurship, and is there part of you where you are already feeling you're leading your children in a direction, or are you now maybe even doing the opposite and say, I want to,
No, my kids, like, it is in my blood so deeply that I feel like, yeah, we see everything through the lens of entrepreneurship. And one of my children's more inclined to that than the other. My husband is not an entrepreneur, does not have interest in being an entrepreneur. He fully supports this idea of like the way that we think. But my son and I will walk down the street and be like, oh, I wonder how much that cost of goods on that business would be. And like, could we do some? I mean, we'll just like have these conversations constantly.
and how
My daughter's younger. What happened?
how old is your son?
Oh, he's 11, but
11. So
he's
so
been
cool.
like that since he was, 8 or something, maybe younger. But he's always thinking, he's like, oh, if I had these Pokemon cards and I was trying to like sell that, like he's constantly thinking about that kind of stuff. So, um, I do feel sometimes I'm like, oh, I should step back in that influence a little bit and let them like find their path. But it's such a part of like how I think and how I think that when you can create something and have it be your own, and my kids also, we are a homeschooling family, but they have every child has certain strengths, and there's certain things for my kids that are a little more difficult academically than others, right? And so I'm like, listen, I can show you how to use your strengths to create stuff. And so let's like focus on those things. And we have the ability to do that because we're at home. But yeah, it is funny. They're definitely highly influenced towards entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and why not, right? So that's also maybe part of your still, and I'm not saying, that this is true, but it sounds to me right now that it's also part of your allowing yourself to be the entrepreneur.
For sure. I mean, there's
Oh,
my yeah, I definitely still have there's such a deep belief system that I'm not going to be able to live up to my family's like legacy, you know? And so and I'm also still like such a black sheep even within the dynamic because they're all restaurateurs. And so they've all gone down a very different path. But because I'm a freedom seeker, like a restaurant is so location based and it's very time consuming. And it's a very different style of business. I love food and I love the eating experience. And I love that I have restaurants that I can go to, but I wouldn't say never, but I don't think it's like the perfect fit for me because of so many different factors. And so I'm even carving like my own way of doing entrepreneurship compared to what my family has done. And so I think there's this idea of like, am I going to be able to find the success that they found and have that, yeah, same kind of path? And is it still weird that even though they've never pressured me like to be in restaurants, but like, oh, is it still going to be acceptable? And it's funny because my dad recently said to me, because a lot of the restaurants and things, some of them are new in this generation, but the very first ones have been like passed down and such. And my dad's like, yeah, but you're creating your own thing. Like you're creating something out of nothing, you know? And that was a really special moment for me, actually, that
yeah.
recently happened.
And I was just like thinking, what if someone listens to this thinking, oh my gosh, she's crazy. You are living already the successful life that other people are dreaming of. You live on an island that is beautiful, that's a vacation destination. You are with your kids. You get to be with them. You get to create something. You can step in if you are required and provide for the family. You can go back and play and dream. This is a level of success that for you it might seem small because you are comparing yourself with your family, but for others that is living the dream.
And this is my biggest, like, for
Mm.
lack of better term, demon. This is this is the issue. My husband and I just had a long conversation with some friends about this the other day because my definition of success, my husband's always like, you're so successful to me. Like you and we have this like dynamic of because I'm the dreamer, I'll be like, we need to do this and we need to go here and da da da. And he like steps into that space and steps into that space and finds a way to provide and do that. And then I have my moments of providing and things, but he lets me dream, right? And so he's like, you're successful. Like, look what you've dreamt up for our family. Like, look what we're doing, you know? And I'm like, yeah, but I haven't reached this revenue goal. Or like, yeah, but like it's not consistent. Or, and it's funny because I'll reach a revenue goal and be like, yeah, but like I could be achieving so much more. And I think that that is normal in entrepreneurship. And I wish that there was a way that I was better at grounding in what the successes are right now and being able to see that instead of like chasing this constantly moving target because that is definitely um yeah, me from 5 years ago probably couldn't even imagine the way that we're living right now, but it's really really difficult for me to see.
It's very, yeah, it's a very interesting conversation, and it's all about defining, right? It's a definition, and we all live by our own self-made definitions, and sometimes it holds us um in our bubble. And if we could just use a different definition, like right now, you have the freedom to choose what does success look like,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also is very much normal because the upbringing and the society, there's a certain level of or degree of uh, acceptance that everyone knows. This means like numbers mean
Right.
success, right? Monetary success equals success. And so we are, even though with the biggest, and I'm not saying that it's only you, I can relate to what you're just described. And because we've been trained so much and we see other people who are living their dreams, to who are following their soul purpose, also making a lot of money. And then there's this difference, right?
Yep,
And this is I think, when motherhood comes in, how do we model this for our children so that they are in not comparison mode, which I think kills a lot of the flow and the allowing of our becoming.
I agree.
Yeah. And it's a journey of always learning, right? And being okay that we're still learning.
Yeah. And yeah, and it just like this whole conversation, it's funny when you reflected that back, like people might be listening
Mhm.
and think that, and I think that's all back to this point of just the story and the internal environment and how we can and why we make things so complicated. I'm constantly asking myself, like, why do I do that? Um,
Because it
but I
feels
do think,
safe, because it's
yeah,
known. It's something
yeah,
you come back to. It's your safety zone.
yeah, yeah, and patterns that, you
Mhm.
know, you can maybe, and maybe I need to like after this, I'm like, I need to journal out and be like, why is that it's still an ongoing story, even though I'm aware of it. And I think that this opportunity that I've had with my husband between jobs right now has allowed me to, in a more rapid space, deal with some of those things. And I hadn't said anything to him because I was like, I don't want him to hear me say, maybe this time off, for you, which is its own struggle and you're dealing with your own sense of worth and your own like things. Maybe it was for me. So I could go, like, I didn't want to say that, but he said that to me the other day. He was like, I think that this has been an opportunity for you to heal some of the things that you need, and I was like, I do feel like that's this rapid container to like face that. But I'm like, I should journal and be like, why am I still, in these patterns? But I think when you said modeling for our children, like that is so true. I do not desire for them to play this game with themselves, right? Of comparison. And not even for me, it's not even comparison of others. It's a standard that I keep raising for myself. And like people have always asked, when I was growing up, like, oh, are you competitive? Are you this? I'm like, no, I'm not competitive, but I want to win against myself. Like, you can also win. I'm fine with like, we can tie, like, that's fine, but I need to have beat my last score. And so I think that that's really, in my case, like, that is my biggest thing is this self comparison and this self growth and this desire to be where I'm not, but in my own definition of where I thought it would be, even more than looking out and seeing others doing that. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't really even know what that means, but that's what comes to mind for me is like, is yeah, where I'm feeling like, oh, I could be doing better than that. I should be doing better than that. Like I've been at this for a long time. Why am I not here yet? Or, whatever the story is against myself.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. So interesting. And if well, we're coming already almost at the end of our time together, but if there's something on top of what we've already deep dived, but if there's something that you would want to say to mothers that may not be even, uh, they haven't embarked on their journey of entrepreneurship yet. Um, Obviously, you're clear, you are a clear vote for entrepreneurship.
Yes.
What do you say to someone who's still deciding and saying, can you really do both? Isn't it also like there's this false belief that you have to choose, or a myth that it's either or? Yeah, what's your take on that?
I think that if there's a calling inside you to create, that in my experience, there's nothing that I could possibly do to ignore it. So I think the first step is accepting that if the calling's there, it's not going to go away. I think that and like allowing that to be okay instead of doing what I've done, as you've just heard throughout this whole conversation. And I will say, like, this is a lot of reflection that I've had. I think I'm in a healthier space. And like you so beautifully pointed out, like, I'm now looking at all those patterns, and my go-to is like criticism, self-criticism, and shame. So that's what you're hearing through this. But I am looking at all of those and saying, like, oh, where did I make this harder for myself? So listening to those that, listening to the experience, but not the expertise, if this makes sense, and I'll explain, of those who have come before you, because you are your own expert. And don't let anybody ever convince you otherwise. There are people that have wealth, so much knowledge and so much experience. And I think that if you're seeking out, if you have that call,
Mhm.
don't give away your power to experts, but absorb their experience, learn from them, and continue to follow the call of what you think is the right way for you. Because it's so easy, especially when we're first starting, to give that power away. But nobody knows what they're doing until they're doing it. Even if they tell you that they've done this for this many years and they're, like, are they on this perfect path? It's like every step of the entrepreneurial journey is a new step. Even if it's the same thing that you've dealt with every time, you're a different person, the person you're working with is a different person, and it's going to be approached that way, and it's constantly learning. So in my opinion, there's no such thing as like this achieved everything like person that you need to completely give your power to. So I feel like just follow that calling, trust yourself. Like, something that I love, a little trick that I actually just emailed about, is if there's a decision that you have and you're not sure which way to go, I actually believe you do know which way to go. But it's hard to hear yourself among like all the chatter. And so I always tell people, like, flip a coin and
Mhm.
assign an option to either side and tell yourself you must go with whatever it says. And when that coin lands, you will know if that was the answer you were supposed to follow, because you will either feel a
Yeah.
sense of dread, like, oh no, that's not what I wanted it to do. Or you'll feel like, yep, that's right. And you already knew the answer. That's all it is. You're just telling yourself what the answer is. And so I think just continuing to turn back into yourself if you're starting this journey, trust the steps that you're taking. Don't get stuck in the internal voice if you can help it. As you could hear, that's my issue that I have sometimes, right? Um, and just, I think tenacity, grit, determination are probably going to be your best tools, because every entrepreneur I know has dealt with stuff, and it's going to come up, and seeing it as an opportunity to grow through and get better is probably the fastest way forward.
Mm, yeah, so wise. So I love it. Yes, cool. How do people get onto your email list? Because I feel like they need to read your emails.
I know I use so I'm a brand and web designer, but and AI educator, but I use my journal half the time as a personal, I mean, sorry, my email half the time as a personal journal, because I really feel like there's so much more to entrepreneurship than just like, I love strategy, I love data, but I also love the work, or, the personal work. And so, yes, my emails are part strategy and part like the journey. Um, so if you go to, my brand is Beachy Keen Creative. And if you go to beachykeencreative.com, I have a little quiz that you can take there, and you can get onto my email that way. And I'm trying to think if there's like other ways. I have a new quiz coming too, but that's where you can find me, and you can always reach out there as well.
We will link like to your website, to your Facebook and everywhere, and to your new course, your AI course. We will link in the show notes. And yeah, definitely check her out because you are doing really amazing. And like I said that in the first meeting, I was drawn to the way you are presenting things in your emails, but also on your website. It's really all beautiful and professional. And so, yes. Um,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for spending this 45 minute with me here on the show. I'm sure there has been quite some takeaways for those who are listening. And yeah, like I said, I don't have an agenda with this. It's just genuine conversations. And It feels like we unraveled quite a few deep topics here.
I know. I don't know how to do like small talk. I'm like, I go deep fast. It's just the way I'm wired. So
Same, same. That's so good. That's what we're here for. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for being in the Sovereign Mama's world. And
yes.
that's it for today. Thanks for
All
listening.
right. Thank you. Bye.